I'd like to introduce you to Alison Vallant. Alison Vallant is a media professional with more than 20 years standing in community engagement. She has had hands-on involvement in the development of community and corporate plans for local government and non-government organisations. And further to this, Alison has successfully added to her experience by undertaking studies in the areas of media law, local government management, social and community planning, local environment management and service reviews. As a member of IAP2 Australasia and with a graduate diploma in local government management, Alison has many strings to her professional bow. A senior manager in local government for 4 years, Alison was also involved in setting the direction for the organisation in the areas of communication, community development and contributing to setting the strategic direction through involvement in the executive team. So Alison has extensive experience throughout a whole range of industries, and part of the focus of Alison's presentation will again be on resilience, and that'll be a focus of some of the discussion today. There'll be an opportunity for questions after this presentation. And if I could just let you know that we are going to make a contribution to Miracle Babies as the gift to Linda. Thank you as well, Sarah.
Thank you, everyone. There's, I was going to say Kirsty. I went, no, that's not quite right. I've just been caught up in the story that Melinda's just shared with us, and I'm just blown away by the work that she's done and what she's been able to achieve. And I guess as Christy's just said, picking yourself up and being resilient when you're faced with challenges is a fairly critical factor for success in anyone's life. And I was just listening as she read out some of the things that I've done in my life, and it kind of sounds like I know it all, but I don't know it all, if that makes any sense. And I don't know that any of us ever know it all. The only people I tell that I know that I do know it all to are my 2 daughters. that's the only time I'm going to get away with it. Then they catch me out all the time. And while I was putting together my slides for this presentation, and I noted that the title is A View from Both Sides, it's actually more a view from all sides. Because prior to starting work with local government, I actually worked for 20-something years in the media and actually reported on local government quite extensively in a range of areas in Griffith, which is where I was born and raised and where I currently live, and in other areas across New South Wales. So I had a fair amount of exposure to local government before I went over to the dark side or to the right side, I'm not quite sure which one it is, and started working in local government back in 2006. And I spent probably 6 years in local government before one of the many challenges that I had to face brought about a change in my life, and I'll get to that a bit later. But some of the things that I'll hope to do today while I'm speaking with you is talk about why local government is relevant. You're all, apart from one, work in local government or are involved in local government, and you're there for a reason. I'd like to talk about why you would want to pursue a career in local government. Again, you're all here because you're currently working in local government. What does that actually mean for you? What you can do to improve your options in local government. I know we've got some GMs here and some directors, but there's a lot of people who are the bread and butter of local government that are in the room, and you're the ones that might be thinking, is this really what I want to do with my life? We've heard Melinda's story, and she is doing what she feels is her life's purpose at the moment. You might be thinking, well, is local government really my life's purpose? And some might even question, why would you want to think that? But anyway, that's a whole other story. And again, what some of the things that you need to think about when you are faced with challenges in your career as well as in your personal life, because while you do try to keep the two separate, they're not, because you are who you are, and everything that happens to you in your private life does impact on how you operate in a work environment. And I'd also like to cover off on anything else that you think might be important. So if there are any questions throughout the presentation, just please shoot your hand up, because I'm more than happy to take questions throughout. Okay, so who am I? Very interesting frock that child's wearing. This person was born in regional New South Wales, and before you ask, no, it's not me, but I was born in regional New South Wales. She has family connections to local politics, as have I. Both of my grandfathers were on the local council. One of my grandfathers, my maternal grandfather, actually ran for state politics. I have numerous uncles who were members of the local council, and my brother was and is a councillor at Griffith City Council, and was the former mayor of Griffith City Council. So quite a bit of connection with this person that we're looking at here. She stood up to corruption within the political party that she was involved in, made some significant contribution to the way it undertook its operations, and made some major changes along the way for women and children. I'd like to think of myself as a bit of an advocate for women and children. I've been involved in quite a lot of community activities outside of my work with council to try and improve access to childcare services within the Griffith community, because there weren't that many available, and as no doubt some of you are working mothers, you know how important it is to be able to find quality childcare for you to be able to go and do your job without being concerned what's happening with your young ones. This person is actually an historic figure in state and local government, but we'll get back to her a little bit later. So, who am I? I'm actually going to move out from behind the table, so I feel like I've got a bit of a barrier there. I'm a daughter. I'm the youngest of 4 children, and again, as I mentioned earlier, I grew up in Griffith, in country New South Wales. I'm a sister. I have 2 brothers and a sister. I'm a journalist. I spent, as I said, 20 odd years writing in the print media and working as a media officer for a state politician. I'm a manager. I've managed newspapers. I've managed departments in local government. I've managed a family, sort of. I'm a wife, and I'm a mother. I'm a counsellor, and sometimes I'm a counsellor for people who are my friends and family, and also for other people. I have a recollection of speaking at length with one person during my media career. We covered the local court extensively, and I had somebody ring me who was very upset about a story that appeared in the newspaper. And I spoke to him for almost 2 hours trying to persuade him that no matter how bad he thought things were, because the story about his court appearance had gone in the paper, nothing was bad enough for him to pursue the path that he was discussing. And sadly, that was a path that would have resulted in him taking his own life. And that was something that I just would weigh on my conscience, and so I spent the time to talk to him. But most importantly, I'm Meg. And I've included that for a very real reason. I think we can't function in life without actually acknowledging who we are and what qualities we have and what we can bring to the table in any given situation, whether that's in the workplace, in any community activities that you do externally or within your family. If you know yourself and you know what you can do, it's going to make a very big difference to how you approach things when they happen, how you interact with people, and how you get on with your life and how you deal with things. And I've just ended the slide, so that's it. Thank you all very much. No, there we go. I'm back. Sorry, didn't mean to yell at you all. But this is me. a very unflattering photo that one of my children took of me. But I've included it because I am nosy. I do like to find out what's going on with people and find out what's important. And I guess that's why I'm doing the job that I'm doing today, which is I've set up my own company to deal with a range of organisations, local government, non-government organisations, community groups, to engage with their stakeholders, to run engagement programs, to consult and advise on communication, because that's my strength. I like to be able to talk to people, I like to be able to find out what's important to them, and to be able to shape the delivery path or to shape the process for them to move forward. I'm currently working on a number of projects. I work with an organisation called Murrumbidgee Medicare Local, which my role with that organisation is to provide support services to students from the Graduate School of Medicine at the University of Wollongong. I'm also working with the University of Canberra, their School of Governance, on a research project that is looking at building resilient communities within the Murray-Darling Basin. One of the things that you may or may not be aware of is that there is the Murray-Darling Basin Authority has released a plan for the Murray-Darling Basin. You may recall a couple of years ago there was a meeting held out at Griffith and there were lots of very angry people and book burning. They weren't happy that the water that is basically the lifeblood of our community was going to be taken away. So that's what their protest is. So I'm actually working with ANZOG to look at how we can build resilience within not just the Griffith community. Griffith was chosen as the pilot community, but right across the Murray-Darling Basin region, because without water there's quite a lot of communities that are going to face a very different future to what they've known in the past. So that's what I'm doing at present. I'm also working with Queanbeyan City Council, reviewing their delivery program. Those of you who are involved in the corporate planning side of things knows that under the IPNR, you've got to look at your delivery programs for the next 4 years because you've got a new council that was elected in September. And I'll also touch on that a little bit later because in the election in last September, I was actually appointed to Griffith City Council. I won't say I was elected because I was appointed. But we'll get to that a bit later. So I've had extensive experience as a manager, 20-something years, looking after newspapers and working in local government. And I asked the question, what's the difference between leading or managing? Would anyone like to volunteer and answer what it means, what management is? Anyone?
Budgeting, HR, timelines.
Yep. You're responsible for others, basically, and you're planning, as you mentioned. You're directing others, you're monitoring their work, you're taking corrective action where it needs to be taken, and basically you're accountable for the output of a department, an organisation. What about leadership? What does leadership mean? Is it the same? It is and it isn't. There are elements of management that do come into some leadership roles, but not necessarily. Leadership is about pioneering a new path or a new direction. It's about working collaboratively with people, which you can do in management. You don't necessarily have to do things all on your own. You can be collaborative in a management sense. It's about demonstrating integrity. It's about being real. It's about being present. And it's about creating hope for people. It's about communicating what it is, what the vision is, and what you're wanting to do. And trying to get people on board. It's about being able to give of yourself. I think if you stop to think who all the great leaders are in the world, they're people who are prepared to give of themselves. I'm really sorry about that feedback that I can hear. I don't know whether you can. It's about being authentic. Being a leader is about being authentic. One of the benefits that I had whilst I worked at Griffith City Council was I was able to access some leadership programs. In 2007, I was part of a program called Pay It Forward, which was run by the Department of Community Services. And it was a real eye-opener actually, because it was an opportunity for me to network with a range of people that I wouldn't normally come into contact with. There were people who worked directly in service provision through the Department of Community Services. There were other people who worked in youth refuges. There were people who worked in women's health centres. There were crisis accommodation, people who worked in crisis accommodation centres. All of these people came to this program to find out more about themselves. And as a result of that, I've met some fantastic people who are really keen to make a change within the communities where they live, within the organisations where they work, but more importantly, with themselves. And it's that decision to make a change with themselves that I found most intriguing, because it's really hard when you hold a mirror up and really look at yourself and find out what your faults are. And my faults are many, and I will also talk about those a little bit later, not in too much detail, I'm not going to give away too much. But that leadership program, the Pay It Forward program, was basically designed, I don't know if any of you have seen the movie with Kevin Spacey called Pay It Forward, on that same premise, that by training people in training, providing information and skills to people in communities, they can then go and transfer that knowledge to others within their communities to generate sort of grassroots leadership program to encourage people to take on a bit more responsibility, to get more involved. And you might be asking, well, what's that got to do with local government? Well, local government is a really important factor in a community structure, and I keep saying, I feel like I'm saying all the time, I'll get to that later. But I promise you, I will get to that later. Local government's role in any community is more than just roads, rates and rubbish. And particularly with the changes that are ahead for local government, I think we're going to find that there's going to be a lot more community engagement involved in what it is that we do, or you do, in your day-to-day activities. The Pay It Forward Leadership Program was run by a fellow by the name of Paul Porteous, and he is, I'm also working with him with School of Governance and with the University of Canberra. He's worked very extensively in community engagement and development programs across the globe. He's working at the moment with governments in Singapore. He has previously worked with governments in Madagascar to develop projects that will develop real change within the communities. And he was actually that was the first leadership program, the first effective leadership program that I had actually undertaken. And I recall our first day at the sessions, he stood up and he was talking and asking us what leadership meant to each of us, and obviously we all had different views. And he said to us, the best you can expect from being a leader is a bloody nose, and the worst is to be assassinated. And I never quite got that until I was elected to council. And I have another story to tell you about that a little bit later. So I guess basically to be a leader, you actually, and don't get me wrong, I don't necessarily think of myself as a leader. I aspire to be a leader, and I'm working every day towards being a leader, but I certainly I don't think I'm there yet. I think it's something that it's an evolving process, and if it's something that you feel you need to do, then it's something that you should definitely pursue. And making the most of opportunities to learn, such as the Pay It Forward program, was important to me. There was also another process that the executive leadership team at Griffith City Council went through that was a leadership program. It was a fairly intensive process that involved every member of the executive team, and there were 8 of us at the time. We were basically locked up in a room, much to the delight of lots of the staff, for a number of days, where we really peeled back the layers of the onion to really get to the core of what the issues were. The reason we elected to go through that process is that we identified that while we were all doing our jobs, we were all managing really, really well, that silo process was well and truly entrenched within the organisation. We actually did an organisational effectiveness survey, and we discovered that less than 50% of the organisation was actually engaged in the work that they were doing. So basically, less than half our staff really wanted to be there. That's a bit of a problem. Thank you. No, that's fine. I can. Yep. Thank you. Is that better? Yeah. I'm really sorry for that squealy noise. I could hear it myself, and I just wasn't sure whether it was where I was standing or like. Anyway, apologies. Anyway, back to the story about the leadership program. We knew that we had problems within the organisation, and we knew that if there was going to be any change, it wasn't going to be just top down and it wasn't going to be bottom up. It was something that had to be right across the organisation. So anyway, so the executive team spent this several days. I think we had about 4 sessions that we were out of the building for 3 days, and as I said, locked up in a room. Somebody gave us the key though, we did get back out. And we developed a set of values that we decided we needed to live into, and we had to start with ourselves. And now I'm going to really stretch my brain capacity. The values that we decided that we needed to have were passion, honesty, integrity, there were 2 I's, inspiration, and love, which was an interesting word to choose for a local government organisation, and it actually came from our Director of Works, which is kind of funny. If you can imagine a guy who's a really ruddy complexion, fairly stocky, sandy hair, he was the one that came up with the word love. And each of those values had a set of rules, so to speak, what they actually meant, and we developed a process of how you would know that those values were being exhibited. You know, what would they see? What would you see if somebody was living into those values? And what would it feel like if somebody was living into those values? And these values were posted up all around the building. And while we were going through the process of developing the values and developing ourselves, we realised that we couldn't do it on our own. We actually needed to have some, minions is not the appropriate word, but it's the word that just popped into my head. We needed to have people within the organisation that actually understood what it was that we were trying to do. So we, at a fairly significant cost to the organisation, we actually had the same leadership training delivered to approximately 1/3 of the staff. And I mean, it's not Griffith City Council is not a big organisation, but we had around over 300 FTEs. So, over 100 people had an opportunity to undertake the same process that the executive team had. And as a result of that, we started to see some real change happening within the organisation. People were happy to be at work. People were happy to turn up. People were actually talking to each other and being nice instead of being not nice. So it was a real process of change that started. The momentum was building gradually, a bit like, as Melinda mentioned earlier, everything sort of layers on top of each other, and that was starting to happen. Unfortunately, the general manager who was leading or driving the change at the time, he had a vision that he wanted to have the senior management team at a level where that if he was not present, that things would still happen. And while that idea was actually grasped by those of us who were on the senior management team, unfortunately, when it was put into practice, things sort of fell over. The general manager had an opportunity to return to his home state of Tasmania. He has quite a number of his family live in Tasmania, and so he moved when the opportunity presented itself. And with a change of leader, there's always a change of direction. That being said, a lot of the values that were developed during that process of change still exist within Griffith City Council. There are still quite a number of people who were part of that process who are still passionate about affecting real change within the organisation, and that's great. So although you can start things and they don't always work out how you planned, it doesn't mean that you haven't affected change. I mean, the change is still there, and hopefully into the future that change will bring about some additional benefits for not only those people who work there currently, but those who are going to come into the organisation into the future. But I've kind of gone off track a bit there. So one of the last things about leadership is actually walking the talk. You can often be in an organisation where people can demonstrate that they know about something, but until they actually get into the process of doing the doing, you know, there's always a question about whether they actually really can do what they say they're going to do. So I've included this because I think one of the key elements that we learnt about during our leadership training process as a team, as a team itself, was about creating something that actually felt good and something that actually sat comfortably with us. We knew before we started the process that things were not quite so good, and we wanted to create something that was better. I don't know, have any of you actually been to Griffith? Show of hands, anyone? Okay. For those of you who haven't been, Griffith is the best place in the world. No, seriously. It does. It has very good food, it has very good wine. It's often been considered as an oasis in the desert, and that's literally, but it is an oasis because the water that feeds off the Murray-Darling Basin system is used for irrigation, and as a result the community's been able to grow on the back of agricultural activities. But it's also a place that is very much about the surface, what people look like. I struggle with that concept sometimes. I don't think the way something looks is always as it is. I'm very much more about what's underneath, what actually drives people, what's the substance that makes the place tick. So I think we need to make sure that within ourselves, it's not just how we are on the outside and how we present to anybody, it's how we are on the inside, what type of a person we are, what do we bring to the table, what are our own values, what are our own belief systems, and what we're prepared to compromise on and what we're not. And that's something that was brought out during our leadership process. We knew what we wanted from the organisation. We knew that we wanted to improve things, not just for ourselves, but for everybody that worked within the organisation. And there was some, as I said, there were some real issues, and we tried, as a team, very hard to address that by living into the values that we'd set, living into the passion and the honesty and the integrity and the inspiration. Probably not so much the love, because that would be inappropriate and wrong. So, why should you lead? Well, there are a lot of cons about leading. There's public scrutiny, there's time constraints, managing people's expectations, because everybody has expectations of their leaders. You have your patience tested, and again, I qualify that statement by saying I seriously do not think that I'm a leader, but I'm trying to live into it. But I don't like not having all the answers, particularly somebody who is as nosy as that picture displayed me as. I like to be able to find out know what the real story is and what it is that interests people, and why they do the things they do. But you don't always get all the answers. And I'm going to take Melinda's cue and move over here because she had absolutely no feedback. Is that better? And obviously in a local government sense, you've got a lot of limitations. You have statutory requirements that you need to live up to. You've got financial constraints. Nobody say rate picking. And that last word is actually resources, obviously. It's run over. You only have a certain amount of tools, of people, of equipment that you can work with, and you've got to work within those constraints. So it can be really difficult when you have a community that's saying to you, we want a new road built, or we want a 50-metre outdoor pool, or we want a health or baby daycare centre. Sorry, I just lost my train of thought there. It's really hard to be able to say to them, well, we would all like that, but... And I guess that's why the integrated planning process is probably a good starting point for councils, because it gives you an opportunity to find out what the community wants and make sure that you can demonstrate in some way how you're going to address their needs, and if you aren't going to address their needs, explain to them why you're not going to. Because not everything that councils are asked to do, and I'm preaching to the converted, not everything that councils are asked to do are actually the functions of local government. But being in a leadership position does have some positives. You can actually be part of the change process. You can actually make things happen by putting in place the right people, the right attitudes, the right support networks, the right equipment, the right resources to affect the change that the community is expecting and hoping. That sense of achievement, you can't beat it. I think one of the first jobs that I did when I started in local government was to organise a forum for young teenage girls to be more involved in managing their financial future. It was a project that the Office for Women at the Premier's Department ran, and some of the feedback that we received from the participants was just amazing. I mean, we have, again, back to Griffith. Griffith is a community that has approximately 60% Italian descent, is made up of 60%. 60% of the people are of Italian descent. And Melinda referred to it a little earlier about, being 18 and being Italian. And there's a certain expectation that where your life is going to go. And for a lot of these girls, their future was that they would work in a career until they got married, then they'd go off and have babies, and that would be it. The whole purpose of the session that I organised was not to expect the knight in shining armour to come charging in and save your financial woes. Because if there was one, I'm pretty sure he missed my door a long time ago. So that, getting the feedback from those young people that said that it actually had opened their eyes to how they could do something for themselves, that sense of achievement was, I was just amazed that I'd been able to put something on that had such a profound effect, and quite a few of those young people that took part in that process actually went on to become involved in community groups or community committees that council actually had, and a lot of them were actually involved in our youth advisory committee. So by giving them an opportunity to change the way they think about something, that was probably one of the most amazing events or amazing activities that I was fortunate to be involved in during my early days at council. There have been many others since, but that's the one that stands out in my mind, particularly as it dealt with young people and women. Again, that sense of satisfaction that you have been actually able to make a real impact in people's life. and to be a role model for others. And I was actually, while I was doing some research for some study that I did through the University of Sydney, and I'll actually just read this to you because it's particularly interesting. Sorry, I need my glasses because I can't read without them. There's a story that was published by Huffington Post Women. It was about a research project that was undertaken in the West Bengal region in India, and it talks about quotas for female politicians in local government. Currently these quotas have been in place since 1993, and the research discovered that in areas with long-serving female leaders in local government, the gender gap in teen education goals disappeared due to the fact that girls had set higher goals for themselves. It also reported that parents were also 25% more likely to report having more ambitious education goals for their daughters, significantly narrowing the gender gap. It was determined that seeing women in charge persuaded parents and teens that women can run things and increase their ambitions. And the reason that I've read that is because I think as women we have a fairly important place in the scheme of things to be role models to other women and particularly to young girls who are entering into, whether it be local government or any career opportunity that they wish to pursue. If we don't effectively demonstrate what can be done, then young people aren't going to know that that's a possibility. I mean, there will always be people who will have an idea that they'll get from watching something on TV or reading something in a book. But unless they can actually see somebody doing the doing, it's really not going to sink in. So I think that demonstrates that by having positive female role models, there's a real opportunity to bring about change within the way women see their own, or young women see their own futures. It will be interesting to see in 20 years' time how many women are actually in federal politics, given that we now have a female Prime Minister and a female Governor General. So anyway, I digress. Another benefit of leadership is that connection that you have with the community, particularly now that I'm a councillor. I have contact from people at any time of the day or night, and by a variety of methods. I actually had somebody message me on Facebook who actually isn't a friend of mine on Facebook about an issue that they had with the water rates notices that they just received in the mail this week. But one of the things that I really enjoy about the whole concept of leadership is the idea of being a servant leader. Quite often, people talk about leadership as being out the front, leading the charge and showing everyone where to go, whereas I probably take the view that leadership is about demonstrating, and getting back to that point that I just made about role models. It's about showing people and about giving to people and giving of yourself to people. To me, that's the true essence of leadership, is being able to give something to others that they may not necessarily have. And quite often, the something that leaders, in my opinion, need to give is hope. I think if you look at who the great leaders are, or who have been the great leaders, all of them have been dealers in hope. I mean, you talk about people like Barack Obama. He won his first election to become President of the United States by being a dealer in hope. People like Mother Teresa, who was a leader within her community, gave hope to all the people that she came into contact with on a daily basis. And Nelson Mandela, who overcame his own challenges to provide hope to the people in South Africa. I mean, you could rattle off a list of names, but the real leaders, the ones that hit home to most people, are those that provide hope. And I guess probably one of the benefits of being in a leadership position, it is actually fun because all of the other things, being able to be connected to the community, being able to do something that's going to make a difference to people, it actually is, it is fun. So, but it's really important to remember where the boundaries are. And this is a lesson that everybody should perhaps learn. And you probably already do know it. There is only so much you control. It's a conversation that I have almost daily with my children because I have a 10-year-old daughter who worries about everything. And I have to keep reminding her that, darling, there's only so many things that you actually can control. You can control whatever it is that you do and say, and pretty much that's about it. Everything else, you might be able to influence people in the way they think and the way they act, but you can't control them. You can suggest to them that maybe it would be better if they do things differently, but if they choose not to, that's their choice. And that's their area of control. And then you've got everything else that you actually have absolutely no control over. And again, I'm going to refer back to Melinda. I really valued your story. I came to motherhood very late in life. I was actually 39 when I had my first child. And she was born with a clubfoot. And I remember when she was born, she was perfect in my eyes. And even with her clubfoot, she was perfect. And we started the process where she had 2 operations before she was 6 months old. And having to hand over a child that you know is going to be given poison to send them to sleep is probably one of the toughest things any person can do. But as I said, she's now 10, she's fine. You wouldn't know she had a clubfoot unless it was pointed out to you. But that was something that happened that was completely outside my area of control. And it's one of many challenges that I've had to face and my husband has had to face. But by no means was it the most devastating problem that we've had to deal with. Before we started today, Christy came up to speak to me to get some information about me. And I said to her that most of my talk was going to be focusing on resilience. And I actually mentioned to her that I've twice been made redundant from positions, senior positions in organisations where I've worked with. And when it comes to undermining your self-esteem, being made redundant is probably right up there. Probably, second only to being dumped by a boyfriend. But each of those occasions presented opportunities for me. I could have, as I said to Christy, I could have chucked my bum in the corner and just done nothing and said, well, he's me. I felt like doing that on more than one occasion. I made the conscious decision to get on with things and try and find what it was that I was really meant to do. I should mention that the most recent redundancy was about this time last year. Actually, it was exactly 12 months ago. The council, I was actually working with Griffith City Council at the time, had been going through as an organisation-wide review, service review, and there was a restructure put up to council on the 20th of February, which is today, last year. And as part of that restructure, my position was actually removed along with 14 other people. So I had hoped that, maybe the job fairies would say, no, keep Alison, she's fantastic. But that didn't happen. I had actually identified my own position to be removed from the organisation because I had adopted an approach that we needed, as a senior manager, I needed to look at the organisation as a whole, not just my own department. I did look at my own department. I was manager of communications and community development, and they were 2 areas that, while there was some crossover, they really didn't belong in the same section. So I suggested that it would be best for the community development section to sit in a planning area to make sure that some of the social aspects that the community development section dealt with on a daily basis were actually incorporated into the long-term planning processes for the wider community. And the communication section, I felt, needed to stay in the executive services area. So obviously, you split a department, you don't need a manager. Anyway, but I actually left the council organisation in July of last year, once the whole process of implementation for the organisation restructure had come into effect. And again, I sort of thought, well, what am I going to do? How am I going to cope? How am I going to pay the bills? And following a number of discussions, that's when I made the decision to set up my own consultancy. And while I haven't been rushed off my feet, I have been kept continually busy, and I'm quite happy with how things are panning out for me. And again, I've done a big digress. But why would you want to be involved in local government? I mean, you have the issue where you're at having to provide services to the community. You've got elected representatives who are giving you projects that you probably don't really need to be dealing with. Why would you want to be involved? Well, local government is the tier of government that is closest to the people. I mean, in most cases, and I'm mindful that a lot of you may not necessarily live in the local government areas where you're working, because most of the people here are from the greater metropolitan region. Out in regional New South Wales, if you work for local government, 9.9 times out of 10, you live in the community. So there's no getting away from the fact that you work for local government, and that brings with it a whole host of additional challenges that I won't go into today. But it actually gives you an opportunity to have a sense of what the community really needs, and I guess that tends to level out the requests that come from above. Local government, as you would all know, is undergoing a review process itself. We have the independent review panel and also the team that's looking at the Local Government Act and looking at rewriting the Act, which is a pretty significant event, given that 1993 was the last time that the Act was looked at in any great detail. Obviously, there's been regulations introduced since then, but as a piece of legislation, to have a complete review is a fairly significant process. I find, in my view, I've worked for state government and local government, and at a local government level, what you do is far more tangible. You can actually see the effects that you're having within the community. And I find that to be, I guess, feeding that self-satisfaction thing. I think that that's a really important thing to be aware of. It actually puts community into the governance processes that the local government is responsible for, because you do have that connection with the people that you serve. Oh, just lost those. There we go. There really is nowhere to hide in local government, as I said. Most people who work in local government live within their communities, and they can't run away from the fact that some of the processes, the work that they do directly affects not only their neighbours, but it also affects themselves. But one of the good things is that you actually see things, as I mentioned, from start to finish. And I was pretty sure I had more pictures in my slide presentation, but obviously not. Okay, I mentioned to you earlier that I was actually elected at the local government elections last September. And I also mentioned the restructure that came into effect in February of last year. And I remember when I had my interview with the general manager, who was going to tell me that my job was going, although I already knew it because I was actually part of the decision-making process. He was a gentleman who had come from a shire in Victoria where he had to undertake a similar restructure process, and in that process a number of senior staff were removed from the structure, and as a result of that some of them ran for local government and were elected, and then when his contract came up for review he had to apply for his job again. Anyway, the upshot of it is he's now working for Griffith City Council, and I need to qualify this. What I'm going to say is that I really have no issue with the General Manager of Griffith City Council. I really don't. He was brought in to do a job, he's doing his job. Yes, at the time it created a lot of heartache for me once the reality that I was leaving hit, and I went through all that gamut of emotions that you do when you're worrying about your future. I have no issue with the General Manager, because if somebody's there to do a job, they have to do a job. And he was doing his job, so I have no problem with that. But anyway, getting back to the story, I remember sitting down in the interview, and I knew that there were going to be a number of other positions coming up within the organisation that I felt that I had the qualifications and the capacity to undertake. So I said to him, you know, Brett, that's fine. I know that there are a number of positions coming up within the organisation, and I fully intend to put in applications for those, for all of them, all 20 of them. No, there was only 2. And if, you know, worst comes to worst and I'm no longer working for Griffith City Council, there's an election in September and I can always run. Not that that's a threat. I don't think you really liked that last phrase. Anyway, when it came to the time for nominations to go in for the local government election, I sort of thought, will I or won't I? Who else is standing? Maybe, maybe not. Do I want to stay in Griffith? Do I want to went through the whole mental debate that you have in your head when you try and make a decision. And I made the decision to run for council. And I think I may have mentioned earlier that my brother is also a councillor at Griffith and was the former mayor. He was also running again. And I think Griffith is actually the first community that actually has a brother and sister as elected councillors. So we went through the election campaign. I did all my how to vote cards, very low-key campaign. And to be quite honest, I was keen to be elected to council because I was involved in running the engagement process for the development of our community strategic plan, and I actually wrote our community strategic plan. So I had this view, rightly or wrongly, that my plan would not be implemented if I wasn't there to make sure that it happened. And as well as that, there was not a lot of interest from the community, from people putting their hands up to be elected. I think we actually had 14 candidates for 11 positions, so there was not a lot of choice there. So I guess where I'm heading to with this story is that I like to think of myself as the last man standing, because I was actually appointed to Griffith City Council. I did not get enough first preference votes to be elected in my own right. That being said, only 3 of the councillors sitting around the table actually did. Everybody else got their own preferences. So as the last man standing, I'm quite comfortable with that, because I think, like Steve Bradbury, and as some of you probably know, Steve Bradbury won a gold medal because everybody else fell over. And that was a long, hard slog for him. 2 years before he won his gold medal, he actually broke his neck. And he was told by his doctors, you'll never get on the ice again. 6 years before he broke his neck, he had actually had his thigh sliced through by another skater's blade. And he had 111 stitches, something. So I kind of think he's a bit of a hero. He knew what he wanted to do, and he kept going until he got there. And coincidentally, he actually came to Griffith during one of our organisational group hug sessions and delivered it to all of the staff that could get there, apart from the operational staff who had to be out doing their jobs. motivational address to encourage people to think about how they can do things better and how they can overcome challenges. So yeah, he's a bit of a hero for me. But he worked at it. He didn't let things that cropped up from time to time get in the way of him doing what it was that he wanted to do. And I guess that if anything that I would like you to take away from what I'm telling you is that life's going to present challenges and you can face them or not. It's your choice. That's your area of control. But as Melinda, she was presented with the situation and she dealt with it. And now she's taking a leadership role. In my view, she's doing that servant leadership, getting out there and trying to make a difference and trying to make things easier for other people. So, I'm going to keep referring to you because I just think you're amazing. You can chuck your bum in the corner or you can get on with it and you can make something of what you dealt with, of the cards that you dealt with. I've been very fortunate. I've had a number of people who I've been able to go to and ask questions of and get support from. Who can you go to? You start right here. We've got the whole range of counsellor staffing levels in this room. There are people here who can advise the rates clerk on how they can pursue a career in local government. We've got general managers in the room who would be able to provide valuable advice to some of the younger people in the room about how they deal with some of the challenges that they do face or will face on a day-to-day basis. So I know that some of you are probably sitting with people that you know. Take the opportunity at the next break to get up and move. Go and sit with somebody that you don't know. Introduce yourself. Talk about what it is that you do. Ask them why they're involved in local government. Make those networks, because without networks, you're not going to get ahead. I mean, Melinda talked about network, a former Premier of New South Wales on your board is a pretty outstanding achievement. But you don't have to have networks at that level. Networks can be anything from a neighbourhood community, or they can be a mother's group, or they can be a room such as this. You should all have your business cards. Swap them with people. Establish connections. That if something comes up and you want some advice, you can go to them and ask a question. The general manager that I referred to that went back to Tasmania, he was the first person that I told about me winning my first contract once I'd set up my business. And he was so happy for me and so enthusiastic. I think he was more excited than I was, which was kind of nice. So there are plenty of options to learn and to improve yourself, and they can come from any area. It's just a matter of seeking them out. One of the things that I did do while I had a very supportive general manager was I undertook some study through the Centre for Local Government. I did my graduate diploma through them, and I would not have been able to do that if I didn't have the support of my general manager. So any of you who are not currently in a leadership position, talk to your supervisor, talk to your directors. Make sure they know what your career path is. Make sure they know what you would like to do, as long as it's not take over their job, because they tend to not be too happy about that. Coincidentally enough, my first performance review in my first 12 months at Griffith City Council, my manager said to me, "Where do you see yourself in 2 years' time?" And she said, "Actually, doing your job." And at the time I was only kidding, but I actually was in 2 years' time doing her job, because she left the organisation and I managed to get promoted, but that's a side issue. Probably the most important thing there is to find your centre. Find what it is, like Melinda did, find what it is that you're passionate about and what's important to you. Because, we've all heard the adage, find a job that you love and you'll never work a day in your life. It's really true. Because when you're doing something that you are passionate about, it's easy. It's really easy. But if you're doing a job or you're doing a role that it's just, I don't want to go to work today, I really don't. It is a struggle. And I mean, I also work part-time, and yeah, that's fine. I don't want to go to work today. But I do it because I need to do it, because that's my regular bill-paying revenue stream. But my passion is engaging with the community and communicating with people. And that's why I created my business, and I'm going to continue working at that. And my advice is that you do the same. Not set up your own business, but find what it is that you really want to do. And if you do, it will make things a whole heck of a lot easier for you. I came across this scroll. It's a Japanese phrase, fall down 7 times, get up 8. That's kind of like a personal motto for me. As I said, I have many faults and I've had many issues in my life, and I'm really not going to bore you all with them. I've given you an indication of some of them. I've found that when things are getting to me the most, if I actually make a decision to do something about it, everything just gets sidelined. It does not become an issue. It is not a problem. And it doesn't consume you. Because you can actually get overwhelmed when things go wrong. And if you allow that to continue, then the only one that's going to be really affected by it is yourself. So if you make the decision that, yep, this is really bad, this really is not what I wanted for myself, I'm going to change it. That's you taking control. When you take control of something, it gives you a sense of self-worth and achievement that you're probably not going to get from anybody else. You can have people tell you how wonderful you are, but until you tell you how wonderful you are, everything else, they're just words washing over you. So I've had to make the conscious decision to tell myself that I can do things, because, again, as I said, I'd probably still be sitting in the corner bemoaning the fact that I've been made redundant and I have no one to go and share my day with, but I do, because I actually get out and do things and make a choice. So, back to that cute little girl, and yes, I'm just reaffirming, it is not me. That little girl is very important to everybody who aspires to a career in local government, whether that's at an elected level or at an officer level. Her name's Lillian Fowler, and it's a pity that there's nobody here from Marrickville, because they might actually be able to tell you who she is. She is the first woman elected to local government in New South Wales, and she was actually the third woman elected to New South Wales state government since its inception. She was elected in 1944 on a campaign based around women's improving services to women and on addressing the taxation methods. She was also a member of the Australian Labor Party Central Executive, and actually resigned from that position when she found that they were using sliding ballot boxes at the federal conferences. So she fought against corruption within her own party. She still stayed with the Labor Party, but she actually stood up to them. So she's probably not a woman that many of you have heard of until today. But when it comes to being a champion for women and for doing things right, I don't think you can get much better than that. So, and this is the last slide that I'd like to show you. So I think by the look of Nikki standing there with her arms folded and the microphone in her hand, I'm running out of time. I love Facebook. I'm a big Facebook fan. And actually, somebody posted this on Facebook quite some time ago, and I printed it out and stuck it on the fridge for my kids to look at every day. And I'll just read it out. Today, you are you. That is truer than true. There is no one alive who is you than you. Why fit in when you were born to stand out? You have brains in your head, you have feet in your shoes. You can steer yourself any direction you choose. Be who you are and say what you feel, because those who mind don't matter, and those who matter don't mind. Today I shall behave as if this is the day I will be remembered. And just on that note, another champion for women who some of you may know, most of you should know of, because you all know the song I Am Woman. I'm sure you do. Is there anybody that doesn't? Okay, Helen Reddy. I used to sing along to Helen Reddy's album when I was a much younger person. She was actually interviewed by Today Tonight back in 2011, and just on that last point, her parting phrase was that she didn't care if she was remembered or not, as long as the things that she put in place continued to happen. And I think that, as a leader, that's probably a good takeaway.